Hello, I'm Simon Owens, and today I want to talk about a piece in The Guardian that was titled Why Indie Podcasts Are in Peril. And basically, the gist of the article boils down to over the last 2 years, we've seen this flood of money flowing into the podcast space, specifically geared towards celebrity podcasters. You saw $100 million go to Joe Rogan at Spotify to exclusively stream his podcasts on Spotify. You had major deals signed by Kim Kardashian West, both Obamas, the royal couple. You had over with Amazon Music, you had Will Arnett and Jason Bateman signing an $80 million deal. Basically, not a day is going by in which a major celebrity is entering the podcast space, usually paid for some kind of big exclusive deal. And the theory of this Guardian piece is basically that because all these celebrities are entering the podcast streaming wars, then suddenly it's crowding out indie podcasters, and it's basically making it much harder for them to gain traction and fight to the front of the line, because there's just so much A-list celebrity talent in that space. I definitely disagree with that idea, because two reasons. I think that, one, a rising tide lifts all boats. So, like, one of the things that has kind of hindered podcasting from growing is the fact that historically, if you wanted to listen to a podcast, it had to be on a specific podcast app, whether it was the Apple Podcast app, the Overcast app, Stitcher, one of the other ones. And someone had to learn how to, download one of these apps, open it, subscribe to a podcast, and use it. And that was like a pretty big barrier to entry. And also, even if you did all that, you might listen to one podcast, but you didn't build it into your routine. Like, you didn't make it a weekly habit. And one of the great things about all these celebrities coming in is that basically they're pulling their fan bases into these podcast apps, which is getting people to use podcasts for the first time. And then while they're in these podcast apps, they're kind of obviously looking around for more and being shown other podcasts and subscribing. So it's like basically creating these downstream effects. Also, at the same time, major music listening apps like Spotify, Amazon Music, also Audible, major audiobook platform. These apps that already have millions of existing users are launching podcast capabilities, which makes that friction even less, because it's basically this app that everybody's firing up to listen to music. They're suddenly seeing these podcast recommendations, so it kind of eases them into the medium. So you're seeing like a major increase in podcast listening as a result. Second thing is basically all these major platforms are starting to kind of pull together podcast hosting, distribution, and ad tech. So one of the reasons that podcasting has grown so slow is because it's really hard to monetize. That's because the sites that host podcasts and the sites that actually distribute them, where you listen to, have always been separate. So you couldn't do really do well like dynamic insertion, delivering targeted ads, all that kind of stuff that's taken for granted on the web, on YouTube, and stuff like that. But what you're seeing is platforms like Spotify are buying up, hosting companies like Megaphone and Anchor, so that they can basically control the distribution of podcasts, so they can start inserting ads into the podcasts themselves. And what we're going to see is a YouTube marketplace open up. So what happened 10 years ago with YouTube is, in order to increase its ad inventory, it basically started doing advertising sharing with YouTube channels with as few as 1,000 subscribers. And what that allowed is that these small creators were able to start monetizing their channels, and that created some incentives for them to spend more time on their channels and create better content, which then, of course, made YouTube even more ubiquitous. So I think we're about to see, and what Spotify has indicated is, and also some of these other platforms as well, is that they're going to allow users to start opting in to their dynamically inserted advertising, so that podcasts with only like 1 or 2 thousand subscribers or listeners can suddenly start monetizing their channels or their podcasts, and then that gives them more justification to spend more time on the podcast, to do them more frequently. And then as that happens, you're going to see them rise up and start generating real income, and these are going to be indie podcasters. And I think just as you see YouTubers today with just independent YouTubers who came from nowhere, had no Hollywood connections, YouTubers today have millions of followers and are making millions and millions of dollars. I think 5-10 years from now, you're going to have podcasters in that same boat. Podcasters who haven't even launched their first podcast yet, who are going to find an audience on these platforms, who are going to start monetizing it, starting with dynamically inserting ads. Then once they get big enough, start launching merchandise lines or doing live shows or getting their own sponsors. And then it's basically going to be this huge Cambrian explosion of new podcasts, really creative content, and podcasters are going to start making a lot of money. And it's not just going to be the celebrities, it's going to be indie podcasters, just like we have thriving indie YouTubers, indie TikTokers, indie Twitchers today. The same thing is going to happen with podcasts. Okay, that's all I have for you today. This is a new experiment with vlogging. I'm trying to incorporate video. So if you like this, subscribe to whatever channel you're watching it on, or go and sign up for my newsletter. It's at simonowens.substack.com. Thanks.